I'll just briefly explain our talk for today, and then we'll introduce ourselves to you, and then kind of get into some basic facts about Islam. Hopefully not be too long-winded and try to get through that quickly, so then we can open it up to questions from you guys and make sure that we're addressing what you want to talk about, okay? The topic for today is humanizing the other, how to combat Islamophobia. And I think that this is such a relevant topic, not just for America as a whole or the West as a whole, but specifically for peace and justice activists. Because I feel like, especially in the Palestinian movement and just in general in a lot of the peace and activism that we do, if we can't overcome this kind of basic impression of the other, then even if we can convince people that there are injustices being done, that there are bad things being done to Palestinians or Muslims or Arabs or Iraqis or Christians that are over in the Middle East, if people see us as the other, they're not going to care. And I think that that's a lot of what's happening, is that maybe we can convince people that there's a problem out there, but if they can't relate to who you're talking about, they're not going to care. And if you look at a lot of what has happened with the PR for Israel, a lot of where they're coming from is trying to relate Israelis with Americans, the Israeli way of life with the American way of life. So that, because when people can empathize and can feel that the group they're talking about, the victim group that they're talking about is like them, and they can feel like, you know what, this could happen to me too, then suddenly they start caring. Suddenly they want to start doing things to try to change that situation. And so I feel like before we can even be effective in bringing awareness to the Palestinian situation, we have to start humanizing Arabs, Middle Easterners, and specifically Islam. Because of 9/11, because of the war on terrorism, Islam has become the new, boogeyman. It's like the Cold War all over again, except instead of communism, it's Islamofascism and Islamic terrorism and whatever buzzwords they want to use, right? So our goal is to kind of inform you guys, who are actually hopefully a little bit more sympathetic and open-minded, understanding about some of the misconceptions in Islam, so that you can start educating people and coming down to kind of this humanizing factor and talking to people about Palestinians on a human level, and not as kind of this other or this separate group that we should somehow pity or care about for some reason. So we want to talk about the commonalities between Islam and, the majority of Americans subscribe to some kind of Judeo-Christian tradition. Of course, we have other than that, but we want to talk about how Islam is relating to the other Abrahamic faiths, how we can start to deal with those common misconceptions that are out there.
So, I guess...
Oh, sorry. And so I thought, I just was reading, sorry about that. I was just reading Plutarch's Fall of the Roman Empire, and I found this really great quote like 2 days ago that I thought is pretty applicable here. It was by Marius. He said, "When a thing is strange, it will seem more frightening even than it is. But that when one has gotten used to something, it will cease to inspire terror." And I think that's very, very relevant, especially considering the way I look, right? I walk in the streets and I apparently inspire terror with a lot of people. So we want to get over this hump. We want to make Islam and Muslims in America as a normal part of the fabric of America, get people used to it so we can stop Bush's policy of inspiring terror, right? So, okay, so.
Hopefully not Romney's, but that's something else. So the next thing I really wanted to talk about was going back to the commonality again and talking about the fundamentalists versus the moderates. So one thing, that I think we have to address here is we've started down this path where what we tried to do, when I say we, again, people trying to, make peace around the world in general, in order to, and this is a thing that Muslims themselves did, were picked up on, I think, by peace activists and people in the media and whatever else. It's like, oh, there's fundamentalists and then there's moderates. And so we immediately said, okay, there's this rift between them. There's these crazy people and then there's the moderate people and whatnot. And so it was easy because it's something easy and tangible for people to pick up on that they can relate to. But unfortunately, we've gone down that road now, and we have people thinking, well, fundamentalist means anybody that really follows their religion, that follows Islam, that may follow some other religion and whatnot. And so one thing that we need to also think about is, well, you know, when people walk down the street and they may see my wife and I together, they immediately think, oh, these are some of those orthodox, crazy, fundamentalist people that we need to be worried about that they're talking about. They're not the moderates or something like that. Okay, so, you know, we don't want to say us and them. So I think one of the main things is we need to draw, you know, this picture of, well, we're all humans, we all have a lot of things in common, and those commonalities are what tie us together, and we can all relate on that kind of level. We have, all of us, some kind of belief system, maybe Judeo-Christian or Islam or whatever it may be, so we can draw on that level. We all have parents, right? So we can all talk about parents and worry about our parents and other things like that. So we're just trying to, again, to go to this commonality thing. And we, you know, people that are trying to make peace, we need to try to avoid in general saying, oh, well, there's these crazy people and whatever, and just try to group people into this so we can just disregard them and say, well, then there's everybody else, and let's worry about that. So be careful, because in doing that, that's actually caused, I'll be honest, that's caused problems for even my family. So we have a lot of trouble when we go around to certain places, and people immediately just think, well, you know, these are the people that they're talking about on the TV, that we read about. These are the ones that are causing all the problems in Libya right now. In Palestine, those are the ones that we need to worry about. So that is not necessarily the case. And so another thing we're going to show you today is we're going to talk about Islam so you kind of have some kind of understanding, because y'all are the ambassadors for peace and whatnot. And so if we try to understand everybody and their backgrounds, that's really how we can draw these commonalities together.
And the point being that Islam as a religion, and if you follow it in the correct way, is a religion of peace, of justice, of freedom of religion. And so to try to say that a person who is a fundamentalist is kind of more prone towards terrorism or violence, but we want to try to encourage moderation in Islam, it's actually not only incorrect, but again, like you said, it's very dangerous, because how does a person differentiate between who's a fundamentalist and who's a moderate? Is it based on dress? Is it based on my accent? Is it based on the color of my hair? We can't do that. So what we need to say and what we need to understand is that Islam and Muslims as a whole, you know, 1.5 billion people, are just like everybody else, and anyone who does these acts of extremism are individuals acting on their own, not being supported by some version of Islam or some you know, offshoot of that's within the Islamic belief system. Okay, so my name is Hebah. Brief background: my parents are Egyptian immigrants. They immigrated to the United States about 40 or so years ago. I was born in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and I moved to Nashville and lived in Nashville and had a really bad hick accent for a long time, so I've been working on that. And then we moved to Houston, Texas. My mom is a civil engineer and she got a job in Houston, so we moved to Houston. And then I went to an all-girls Catholic school in Houston, Texas. And although I wasn't Muslim, but I would call myself more of a cultural Muslim. So my parents raised me kind of more with the basic framework of Islam without really like a solid knowledge of it. So I would say that I was a Muslim because my parents called me a Muslim, okay? And then, so I went to Catholic school, attended Mass, wore my little plaid skirt, had nuns, you know, in the school teaching me. And then I went to Texas A&M University. I got a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering, and then I went to the University of Illinois, got a master's degree in mechanical engineering. Met him there. He was, I wasn't covering or really practicing, and he would borrow epoxy from my lab. And so we started talking, and he found out that I was Muslim, so he started asking me questions that I couldn't answer. And so he told me, wow, I've been studying Islam, and I really want to have these questions answered. And I couldn't answer any of them, so it was pretty humbling that this white guy knew more about Islam than I did, so it kind of pushed me onto what I call a faith journey. And I really said, you know what, I have to choose for myself what I believe, and I need to really research and figure out for myself. So that kind of started what ended up being maybe a 5 to 6 year journey for me. After I graduated, I got a degree with an oil company in Houston, and I was actually going out on oil rigs. I had a hard hat and steel toe boots and was putting piping in the middle of the Gulf of New Mexico. And then I just started really getting disinterested in the corporate world and disinterested in the rampant sexual harassment that existed in my field. I also started volunteering with Afghani refugees that were widows and orphans, and I really loved
refugees.
Afghani.
Afghanistan, yeah.
And I really was starting to really love my activism work and not really interested in helping the corporate bottom line anymore. And I also was getting more into my religion and practicing Islam, which is what I chose. And so I eventually quit my job, became a school teacher for 6 months, and then got married, and then moved to Illinois, where he finished his PhD, and then he got a job here as a professor at UNM. So that's how we ended up here. So now I don't work in my field, except to help advise him sometimes. And
it's managing, it's not advising.
Right, manage him. And otherwise, I do a lot of speaking. Specifically, I go to colleges, churches, high schools, talking about Islam, trying to debunk misconceptions. And then I've had a few opportunities to do things more on an international and national scale. There was a profile article written about my sister and I in the New York Times that you can look up if you want. I was interviewed on CNN a few times about the ban, the niqab ban, and some other things. So, you know, and I was blogging for a while, and then now I'm just kind of chilled out and homeschooling my kids. So that's me.
So I'm Zayd Leseman, and my story is a little different, but you'll see where we met up eventually. I was born and raised in Illinois. So basically, quick thing, I was adopted as a young child. That made me feel a lot different than a lot of my peers and was made fun of and whatnot for that simple fact. But that really, gave me something that forced me to actually look at my situation and why people say things and empathize and sympathize with people if they're in some other kind of oppressed situation, I would say. And so I was raised a Methodist. Okay, did that my entire life. I won't go into all those details, but that didn't necessarily agree with me on all levels, so I decided to take my faith journey, which was several years, and ended up at the University of Illinois. I got my bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering, master's degree in mechanical engineering, and then that's when we met and whatnot. But then through my faith journey of all the faiths and whatnot, the one that resonated with me the most was definitely Islam, clearly. And so I became Muslim right before 9/11, months before 9/11. So that was the true test, really. So everybody else just thought I was a crazy, oh, you can change your religion and whatever, and don't worry, this won't last. We'll go back to how you were. No, no, no. But I had a lot of friends, and then 9/11 happened. They're like, well, you're one of them. And yet again, I was one of those people that was, brought to the side, and they dehumanized me, and they're like, well, you're one of those terrorists and whatever, and you agree with them. And I'm like, I never said I agreed with them or anything. So that was a hard situation, but that immediately put me on that side, and all about the Palestinian movement, okay, but of course the anti-war movement that spawned out of the entire 9/11 mess. But so on and so forth. So moving forward, I became Muslim right before 9/11, but because of the oppression that I experienced, I decided to move to Egypt to study Arabic, because it's one of the neat things about Islam is it's been preserved in the Arabic language. So I went and lived in Egypt for a year and studied Arabic and learned Arabic, and then I came back and I got married and finished my PhD, and you heard the rest of that there. And now we are married. I'm a professor at UNM in mechanical engineering, and we have 2 lovely kids. You didn't mention.
I said I'm homeschooling them.
Yes, but you didn't mention.
I gave birth to 2. My biggest feat was giving birth to my children, actually.
Yes.
My oldest is 8½. She's a girl, Khadija, and my son, Salah, is 5. And I actually did a home water birth with my son. So that was actually one of the most amazing things I've ever done in my life, for those of you who have given birth.
Public school?
I'm homeschooling. So can we go very quickly and everyone just say their name and just tell me what faith tradition you feel like you're part of, or you were raised in, or whatever you feel comfortable saying.
My name is Jessica Kimmel. I'm a professor of education at the University of Incarnate Word in San Antonio. I have 1 foot in the Episcopal Church and 1 foot in the Catholic Church, and I talk to God and she doesn't care. I also work in interfaith. I work with a nun at Incarnate Word, and we do interfaith dialogue with Muslims in San Antonio. We probably have the best Christian-Muslim relationship. When my graduate students came to class the first night, they said, "Oh, Dr. Kimmel, are we having an iftar?" I said, "No, honey, you missed it. It was over."
Ramadan moves. Okay.
Pamela Olson, I was raised Methodist in a small town in Oklahoma. I rebelled against it as a teenager, and also I take my own kind of faith journey via a physics degree and in Palestine. So I lived in Palestine for a couple of years. I wrote a book called Fast Times in Palestine, and I have kind of a personal faith, I guess.
Thank you. Great.
My name's Sylvia, and I was raised as a Christian in Egypt
Okay.
and rebelled in high school, and I think I'm still on my journey.
Good.
I'm Sally Ellis Thompson. I was raised as a Mennonite for a child, but I rejected the exclusivity of the religion, and now I'm a worshipist, and I'm still working on my side.
I'm Liz, and I went to the, started congregational, went to the Unitarian Church that Sally Ellis Thompson was part of. And when I was a teenager, I was very angry that the Unitarians seemed so discriminatory against the Catholics. And, you know, thought the Catholics were inferior. But, and now I'm trying to breathe deeply and be present.
My name is Miles Garninger. I'm a lifelong Episcopalian. I go to St. Bede's in Santa Fe. Probably the most liberal Episcopal parish in the diocese. I don't know, there might be another one that's more liberal. I've always been for women in clerical orders, which has been an issue in the church. And so I'm a liberal Episcopalian.
Okay, thank you.
Stan Hordes, I'm the historian here in Albuquerque. Raised as a conservative Jew and still practicing Judaism, and very strong supporter of peace and justice in Palestinian issues.
Welcome, thank you.
I'm Harry Helmerson. I was raised as a Lutheran. I no longer go to church. I've been curious about why the mainstream churches aren't speaking up more in support of Christianity versus, what is it called, Christianism, sort of militant Christian beliefs.
Thank you.
I'm Barbara Medina from Santa Fe, and I think it's interesting that most everybody was raised in one faith, and now they're somewhere else. I was raised as a Southern Baptist and resented the exclusivism of the Baptist Church, so now I'm a Presbyterian, which is not quite as far as St. Lee.
I'm Gordon. My family was involved in Christianity in opposed denominations as I was growing up. I am not a believer, so therefore I'm on my own.
Okay.
Carol Pearson, I'm a Quaker. Always have been since I was a teenager. Live in a town that doesn't have a Quaker meeting, so except a tiny one. So half the time I go to the Presbyterians, and half the time I go to a tiny Friends worship group.
In the back?
My name is Bradley Conway. I'm a student in the Earth and Planetary Sciences department. I'm not affiliated with any religious organizations, but I'm looking to find my own spirituality, and I guess I'm very anti-war.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Sima Sandoval. I was baptized Catholic, Mexico Hispanic Catholic. I wouldn't say I participated very much in the church, but it is a very strong tradition in New Mexico culture. So I'm a Muslim now, if you didn't notice by my presentation. I'm still learning, so if I can.
Thank you.
My name is Karen Cobb. I'm ordained in the Presbyterian Church. I have one foot in the Episcopal Church as well. My home parish is St. Andrew, but I have a strong connection to St. Michael's as well. I have been a peace activist since my 20s. Right now I earn my living as a therapist, and I just discharged a Palestinian boy yesterday who was born in occupied Palestine, and carried a lot of scars from that. So I'm very, very interested in our work here today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Miguel. I'm from here, from Mexico. I'm from a Spanish Catholic family, and I was raised as a Jehovah's Witness, however, and I left that organization as a teenager, and I've since been immersed in studies at UNM, and this past year I began studying the Quran, and I recently became Muslim 2 months ago. I guess I'm still on my faith journey as well.
I think we all are going to be until the day we die.
You never stop. Yeah. Excellent. Thank you.
I'm Lisa George, and I was raised in Chicago, I'm a fellow Illinoisan, and my parents were secular Jews, and I went to synagogue, and then we moved to the suburbs and kind of lost it. And, and then I got kind of eclectic and, tried a little Buddhism and paganism and Episcopalian and liberation theology. And then as I got older, I thought, well, what about my roots? There's nothing wrong with my roots. And so now I'm kind of connected with Maharaj Shalom.
Good.
I'm Arlene Renshaw. I was raised in a Christian tradition, and I'm another one of those people that, after more than 6 decades, still on a journey from pretty conservative roots to. I'd like to think that I've come a long way since then, but I guess over time I see less and less relevance to denominational labels, and just kind of more concerned about core faith issues and the commonalities.
Good. Thank you.
My name is Jerry Oglesworth. I was born in Shreveport, Louisiana, to a Pentecostal family, and endured, I guess, probably till about the time I went into the Navy. And I've been through various stages of spirituality, and I'm leaving my mind open, shall we say. Sometimes I go to church with the Catholics. That's where I'm at.
I am Nicola Dutoff. I am French and American. I was raised Catholic, and I stick with my faith, although I don't agree always with the institution. But thanks to a Franciscan who is very well known by Charles, I have had some other opening and some big views on religion and acceptance.
Good, thank you.
Alvin Alexi Curria, baptized Congregationalist, went to Sunday school in the Methodist, ordained Presbyterian, and finally came home to a spiritual home in Eastern Orthodox, the Orthodox Church of America, where my wife and I have been for the last 30 years. Amateur anthropologist interested in Eastern Europe, and worked with Orthodox children's books, and also the studies of how life is changing in Eastern Europe. Was introduced to Islam in a cafe in Ramallah in 1974.
Wow.
And it was one of those personal things that sears itself into your memory and becomes a pivotal point where you can introduce your story to somebody else. Actually, I feel we're at the end, 8 decades, at the end of our spiritual journey. We have found our home, and the church is now our liturgical celebration, which is all in the heart and very little in the book. It is our major source of nurture, and we're prepared for our going home, which we feel is ending.
Thank you.
And
from Portland, Oregon, raised Presbyterian, now in a liberal Episcopal church, and we spent 5 months for the last 2 years volunteering in the history school.
Thank you.
It's been wonderful.
I'm Hebah Ahmen. I've only been in New Mexico for a couple of years. I'm also faculty at UNM. Raised Methodist, still a Methodist, one of the few here, I guess. But I have 4 daughters, 2 of which are Quaker, and 1 has converted to Judaism. So the next big celebration in our family will be my grandson's bar mitzvah within the next year.
Wow, that's great.
Which congregation?
Not here in New Mexico, they are in Philadelphia.
Well, thank you.
And I was born in Arizona. My father was Catholic, my mother was Episcopalian. I did not have a religious orientation today. I grew up in an area that was highly segregated and very racist. And so I spent a lot of my adult life after graduating from college working in the issue of black equalization of rights, human rights for black people. And so I had experiences where I was, where the Ku Klux Klan was putting notices out that I was working for black equality. So
You've seen a lot, huh?
I became a teacher and came to Albuquerque. I did not have any, I had Jewish friends always, and there was no evidence of any kind of dehumanizing of Jews, but it was really a terrible racist situation to grow up in. So I spent my adult life working against that. And so I have had opportunities to teach in schools and to start, with the
younger generation.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
I'm Judith Kidd. I was raised in Baltimore. I'm very Catholic in my young days, and sort of gone through many journeys. And spent a lot of time working on peace issues through organizations and connect a lot with the Peace and Justice Center here in as several of us here do. And I think religiously, I'm a spiritual person, but I call myself now mostly an engaged Buddhist. I like that tradition. I go to some of their sanghas, and it has that loving kindness aspect that really speaks to me.
Okay.
I'm Judy Spain. I grew up in Iowa as a Roman Catholic and now go to St. Bede's Episcopal Church in Santa Fe.
Okay, well, let's. Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
You're not off the hook. But
So it's, how was that? Oh, just your name and what faith tradition you grew up in and or consider yourself now.
So my name is Beth Goldman, and I grew up in Jewish tradition, Reform Jew, and I still, I'm kind of like figuring out what Judaism is to me in my life now.
Okay, so we're going to try to go through this sheet pretty quickly just to get some basic facts to you, and then hopefully
everybody has one, right?
The questions and answers. And also Also, we have free copies of the Quran and other literature in the table by the door if you're interested. I always try to give out copies of the Quran because unfortunately we hear a lot in the media quotes and verses from the Quran, what the Quran says and doesn't say. So the best thing is for you to have one in your hand and you can look it up yourself, okay? Islam, religion is a hard topic to talk about, and especially in America, a lot of times we're told religion is a personal thing in the workplace, in the school, in the academic environment. You're not supposed to talk about your faith or your beliefs. But I'm hoping that in this room today, we can actually have an open discussion without having conflict and say, you know what, let's get to know about each other and let's try to understand religion or anti-religion or being non-religious. And that's okay, because it's a form of learning, not me trying to convince you or you trying to convince me, okay? So Islam, the word Islam is an Arabic word, and it means the peaceful submission to the Creator. And so when you put in Arabic mu in front of a noun, mu Islam is one who does something. So mu Islam, Muslim. Okay, so Muslim is one who peacefully submits themselves to the Creator. So Islam is the belief, and Muslim is one who follows up. Okay? The main belief of Islam is that there is only one God, excluding all partners in worship and attributes with God, which means that Muslims are what we call absolute monotheists. We only believe that there is one Creator and that nothing in the creation is affiliated with or part of the Creator. And that we only worship and do everything for that Creator alone without diluting or having partners with God. And Allah is the Arabic name of God. So just like we have Jehovah or Yahweh or the Great Spirit, it's just an Arabic name to refer to the one who created everything and who has control over everything. And actually Christians in Egypt, in the Middle East, will use the word Allah to refer to God. So there's not, unfortunately, there's some misconceptions that, you know, Allah is the moon deity, Allah is this fabricated pagan idol that Muslims worship. A lot of, unfortunately, right-wing Christians will try to say that Muslims do not believe in God, and that instead they believe in an idol called Allah, these kinds of things. So that's not true. It's just, it's that same concept of the Creator. Now, how we define the Creator, that could be different according to, I guess, what religious faith or tradition you follow.
So, having come from a Christian background and now being Muslim, I'd say really there's not major differences between the two, okay, which may be shocking and startling. We can discuss the finer points of everything and whatnot. But I would say the major difference between the two, from my perspective, having been brought up Christian and then becoming Muslim, is the entire Jesus issue. And for me, that was the big thing, right? Is the Trinity. Okay, Jesus is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, right? We don't believe that. Muslims believe that Jesus is a prophet. Okay, and there's plenty of places in the Quran that actually points that out specifically. I brought you one here. So now I'm looking at Jesus in Islam, that bold part. It says that Jesus is speaking as a baby to defend his mother. So this is a baby in the cradle. God knows if it was a manger or whatever.
And we believe in the virgin birth.
We look into all of that.
Well, no, you have to say.
I know.
Yeah.
Steal my thunder. I planned something out.
Sorry.
See, where's the paint? I am indeed a servant of God. He has given me revelation and made me a prophet. And he has made me blessed wherever I be, and has enjoined on me prayer and chastity as long as I live. So there's several things you can pull out of here. Okay, the first one is that he was a prophet. So we don't claim that Jesus is God. We don't believe in the Trinity. We just believe that he was a prophet, which is one of the best of men. So, we believe in Moses and Jonah and Adam, all these guys that brought revelation, brought messages to mankind, okay, and spoke with God and whatnot. So he's one of those people, okay? We don't believe that he is God. He's not part of the Trinity. So that's the first major thing. The other thing that's interesting, and this is a current issue, right, this entire chastity business, all right? So the stuff going around with that little piece of Coptic script and whatever that says he was actually married or maybe had a wife or whatever, we don't believe that. He says, I'm going to be chaste for as long as I live. Okay, and there's other things too, but the commonalities are there. So the other ones are virgin birth. So we believe there's virgin birth. And so Jesus is speaking as a baby, okay, less than a year old, just, I don't know exactly the time period, but he's able to speak. He was just born, and he spoke. And so this was one of the miracles we believe that he actually did. Okay, the other thing is we believe he's going to come back at the end of time. So right now he's the Messiah. Okay, we believe that, the Messiah. Okay, so he's the Messiah, which means he's going to come back for the end of days. So he was born, and we believe that he's in heaven. God's going to send him back, and he'll be the last prophet to actually walk the earth, towards the end of days and the day of judgment and whatnot.
And there's, if you take a copy of the Quran, there's a whole chapter called Mary, or Maryam, and it's all about the story of Jesus, peace be upon him, the story of Mary, of John the Baptist. All of these people are actually written about in the Quran. And that's pretty shocking for, I would say, mainstream America. That's kind of a big issue that I think would help people start to relate to Muslims. So as a peace and justice activist, this is one of the key topics that maybe you could talk to people about to kind of bring them closer to humanizing Muslims and humanizing Middle Easterners.
When was the Quran written?
So we believe that the Quran, that Prophet Muhammad, peace be on him, was the last prophet sent. So we believe that all of the prophets were sent from God. We believe in over 100,000 prophets were sent since the beginning of mankind. And that Prophet Muhammad was the last one, and he was around 600.
Yeah, in the 6th century.
In the 6th century. And that he was considered the unlettered prophet, which means he could neither read nor write. So we believe the angel Gabriel came to him over the course of 23 years and brought him revelation. He would memorize it, he would tell his companions they would memorize it, and then they began to write it down. So that's how we believe. And then it was revealed in Arabic, and the actual word of God that we believe in is the Arabic version of the Quran. So although you can take a translation, we don't believe that that's the word of God. We only believe in the Arabic Quran. And so all Qur'ans in Arabic are exactly the same. There's no different version, every letter is exactly the same. And that's part of the preservation of keeping the original text. Okay, social obligation in Islam. Just very quickly in the Quran it says, it is righteousness to believe in God, to spend of your sustenance out of love for him, for your family, for the orphans, for the needy, for the traveler, for those who ask. To be steadfast in prayer, bless you, and perform regular charity, to fulfill the contracts you have made, and to be firm and patient. When I go and speak, I tell people this is my code of ethics right here. As a Muslim, I believe that this is how I should live my life. And I tell, I speak to high school students who are initially very afraid of me when I first come in the classroom. And I tell them, when you see me in the street, I don't want you to be scared of me. I want you to say, if I need help, that's the person that I need to go to. If I need someone to care about me or to talk me through something, a Muslim is the person who can do that for me, instead of this fear factor that's always out there. It also says, serve Allah and join not partners with him, and do good to parents, kinsfolk, orphans, those in need, neighbors who are near, neighbors who are strangers, the companion by your side, and the traveler. In Islam, we actually believe in a system of rights and responsibilities. So I have rights on people, and I have responsibilities to people. And that includes my neighbors, be them Muslim or non-Muslim. And actually, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, his companion said that the right of the neighbor is so great that we thought they would share in the inheritance. So that is very applicable in America, very applicable for Muslims in America to show their community, to show their subdivision, their local neighbors, that they're good neighbors and that they're going to make sure that they're taking care of their neighbors' rights as much as they're worried about themselves.
All right, moving on. So the next one is treatment of non-Muslims in Islam. So this is taken from the 2nd chapter, verse 256. It says, let there be no compulsion in religion. Truth stands out clear from error. So let there be no compulsion in religion. So let's be straight. So we don't see evangelicals or anything like that. We don't go out and you must become this, whatever. Okay, you can, try to force somebody to do something, right? And they can say one thing and think another. So it's better just to, of course, let the people choose for themselves what they want to believe and whatnot. Okay, so that's one important aspect of it.
So that's directly against people saying that Islam was spread by the sword, or that people say become Muslim or die. It's actually forbidden in the Quran to force someone to become a Muslim, because God cares about your heart and your mind, not about what you say with your lips. So what's the point? It's like trying to force you to love me. No, you can't force someone to love you, so how can you force someone to believe?
The next one is, Allah forbids you not, with regard to those who fight you not for your faith, or drive you out of your homes, from dealing kindly and justly with them. For Allah loves those who are just. This one's very appropriate, right, for the topic of this entire conference. Allah forbids you not from dealing kindly and justly with them, these people that have been trying to oppress you and whatever. So we're really, we're trying, and we should be kind and just with anybody, no matter what they've done with us, because that's who Allah really loves, is those who are actually just. Okay, this is very important, and I think it stands alone without saying any more about
Well,
that.
I would say, but what it is saying that Islam is not a completely pacifist religion. So in Islam, we are given the right to fight back in the case of self-defense, or in the case of when someone is trying to take your land, force you off, or stopping you from taking your rights. So this kind of statement in the Quran is very important because it says, as long as they don't do this to you, deal kindly and justly with them. And if they do, then you have the right to fight back. But if you keep reading on, it says, but once they stop, you must stop and do not transgress the bounds. So it's very important that we don't say because someone is doing one thing wrong, then I can go and just, overdo it, or once they stop, this is still my enemy and I still have the right. There's very specific rules of engagement in Islam that allow, yes.
One of the most misunderstood concepts that I'm aware of is this concept of jihad, that my understanding it simply means a struggle, and mostly an internal struggle.
So jihad means, the word jihad means to struggle, and it can mean to struggle in a militant way in the case of self-defense, but in general, jihad is struggling for the sake of Allah in anything you do. Struggling to purify yourself, struggling to help the needy, struggling in peace and justice. Anytime you're basically coming out of your comfort zone, coming out of your shell and pushing yourself to do something for the moral good and for the sake of pleasing God, that is the concept of jihad. Now, if that means, for example, that you are trying to free someone from oppression, and in some cases that is in a fighting sense, then in that sense it would be considered a jihad. But this concept of jihad is a holy war to forcibly convert everyone to Islam is a completely non-Islamic concept, and it's completely incorrect. Does that answer your question?
That was it.
Okay, thank you.
What's the next? Moving.
Okay, killing innocents in Islam. It says, killing an innocent human being is like killing all of humanity, and saving the life of one person is like saving all of humanity. This is so important because this shows the weight of how God sees the killing of innocent people and the protection of human life, and how much every human life, Muslim or non-Muslim, is valued by God and is valued by Muslims. And so, when I was watching the buildings burning on 9/11, and I was at work and I'm just crying, and I can't imagine being in that kind of situation. All I can think of is, are they reading the same book as me if truly Muslims are the ones that did this? Because I think this is very clear, and very clearly the World Trade Center and the other areas had innocent people who were not in direct conflict and were not directly trying to, as it says above, drive you out of your home or fighting for your faith. So I think that this is a very important thing for us as peace and justice activists to talk about with other people, and to almost kind of memorize this and where it is in the Quran, because it's the single best way to counter this image of Muslims in the media.
Okay, the next one is marriage in Islam. And among God's signs is this, that He created you for mates, you mates from amongst yourselves, that you may dwell in tranquility with them, and He has put love and mercy between your hearts. All right, this clearly shows the kind of love that is supposed to be between a man and a wife in marriage. Okay, there's lots of things that surround this too. We'll talk about women's rights in Islam. This is a hot topic, and you've got one of the best people to talk about it. But one of the things is, the biggest misconceptions is, women are forced to marry men that they don't want to, and it's all arranged marriages, this, that, and the other. That is absolutely not Islamic. And what we're here to talk about today really is Islam and what it says, not what cultures do. And that's another important thing that we need to separate, right? There's cultural practices that people try to convince their children, or they themselves are even convinced of. They're actually cultural things that aren't justified in the religion itself. Okay, and I think what we find throughout history, whether we're talking about Christianity, whether we're talking about Islam, or pick any other religion, doesn't really matter. Okay, the rulers, they take enough of the truth from one of the religions, and then they apply that, and then they ignore the rest, and then they can justify wars. They can justify forcing their daughter to marry some guy because that way he's going to try to get a lot of money from him, or some kind of deal that's going on. They can justify honor killings. Okay, and we've all heard about these kinds of things. Okay, that is not part of Islam. That's outside the bounds. Okay, we're trying to talk about Islam today. Okay, there's definitely culture issues. That may be some of the questions you guys bring up, and we can address those one by one, but I wanted to bring that up in particular. So that's an important concept. There's culture, and then there's religion. Okay? So we're trying to just tell you today this is what the religion says, and that's why we give you facts from the Quran. Okay?
And here it's important to state that I'll say two things. First, there's some people that will say, oh, I hate organized religion because it's the cause of all major wars. And I would say people not following their religion is what causes wars. Because no, religion in its base is, if it's from the truth, if it's from the Creator, is about creating a better way of life, not me versus you and just trying to create some kind of domination in this world. Because any major religion does not believe that this world is the end, so why would we justify doing wrong in this world? The second thing I would say is that Islam is not quite an organized religion because it's different because it's not an institution. And when I say that, I say it because we don't have clergy and we don't have a human hierarchy. And in that way, it is different from what would be more considered the Judeo-Christian or more institutionalized religion. We don't have a pope, we don't have bishops and priests, we don't have a human being that has the right to excommunicate someone from Islam or tell someone that they're Muslim.
The important clarification here is we're talking about 90% of Muslims on the planet, right? Sunni Islam, those that follow the Prophet Muhammad and whatnot. We're not talking about the Shiite Muslim population. It's about 10% of Muslims concentrated in Afghanistan, Iran, and Iraq. Okay, those guys have a slightly different system where there is a clerical setup. There's an Ayatollah, which is like the Pope of Catholicism and whatnot. And mullahs and all these other things.
But the 90% of Muslims who follow Sunni Islam would not follow a ruling by an Ayatollah or a mullah. That's not applicable to us. Yeah, exactly.
Where does Sufism?
So Sufism is a very difficult thing to define because there's, just like with Islam, there's not like an institution of Sufism, so you have many different ways of practicing, but in general, a Sufi would say that they're taking Islam and then adding like a mystical aspect to their Islamic beliefs, whereas, so for example, trying to reach the divine, trying to interact with the divine, whereas mainstream Islam would say that that's not our goal here. Our goal here is to live the best way we can, follow and worship God, and make sure that we're in line correctly, that our spirituality has to do with understanding what God wants for us, not trying to reach God. Do you see, does that help? So Sufism would be kind of like Kabbalah, I would say, in Judaism, is adding more of a mystical divine aspect to the practice. Okay? And again, I'm not a Sufi, so I'm just giving you my understanding of the situation. So modesty in Islam. So in the Quran it says, and say to the believing men that they should lower their gaze and guard their modesty. That will make for greater purity for them. And say to the believing women that they should lower their gaze and guard their modesty. So it's kind of important that in the Quran, the men were actually addressed before the women. Okay, so a lot of times you'll see me dressed in this way, you'll see Muslim women covered, and people will say, well, that's oppression, that's not fair, how come the men don't have to? Well, actually, men do have modesty requirements in Islam. The first being that when they interact with a woman who is not in their family or in their wife, they're actually told to lower their gaze, which means to look down so that they are not in any way objectifying the woman that they're speaking to. The point is not elevator eyes or looking at certain parts, and I think most of us women would say that we have dealt with this in public and in the workplace, men objectifying us, and when we're trying to communicate with them, instead they're focusing on something else. And that's not the point. The point is that when a man and a woman interact, there should be a dignity and a respect between the two, and it should not be a sexualized situation. Now, Muslim men, their clothing aspect of modesty is different from Muslim women because men are created differently from women. And so, it's like saying, for example, that certain undergarments that women wear, men should wear also because we need to be equal. Well, no, everything is functional, right? So as a Muslim, and as from my perspective, and again, you don't necessarily have to agree with me, the way that a man reacts to a woman is different than the way that a woman reacts to a man. And so, for example, men can be more visual, they can be more, they tend to objectify women more easily from a visual perspective. Whereas women will look at a man and think, he looks nice, it would be nice to hug him, he's cute, something like that. It's not kind of the same process, it's more of an emotional, a touch type of thing. Not only that, but also because we know that women have a tendency to be more victimized in society where men do not respect women, there is a concept of a woman using her modesty to actually empower herself and control the situation that she's in. Okay, so I'll talk about that a little bit more. But it's a different perspective. It's very different from kind of the Western feminist perspective of I'm free with my body. It's actually a different form of what I consider empowerment for a woman, and I'll talk about that a little more. And then it says, tell the believing women that they should cast their outer garments about their person when in public. That is most convenient, so that they will be known as a believing woman and not be harassed. God is oft-forgiving, most merciful. So again, this states why there is modesty, why we in Islam believe that modesty is a virtue. It's because so that a woman can be respected and dignified, and also so that she will not be harassed. She will not be sexualized, she will not be objectified. You know, I tell people when I go in public, men have to deal with my brain because I don't give them a choice. And that's really what I believe, because my sexuality is in my control, and it's in my marriage and in my home, and with my husband, yeah, no, I don't cover this way at home, you know, but my sexuality is for my husband alone, and that's my choice, and that's my empowerment. And having worked in the workplace, unfortunately, I've had men hit on me, I've had men touch me in inappropriate ways, I've had men make fun of me and say, you're superwoman because you're trying to be smart, but then they still very much bring me back to my body and what my body is about. And so for me, I believe that modesty is a tool that women can use to empower ourselves and to insist on being respected and valued, and also my way of protecting what I value. I value my body, so it's not for every Tom, Dick, and Harry to have access to. So it's when a Muslim woman chooses to cover, and yes, there are situations where a Muslim woman is forced to cover, but I have never, and I'm telling you honestly, I have never met a woman from any country that covers because she's forced to. And if it exists, it probably exists in a situation where women have a lot more problems than what they're wearing. Okay? We're talking about a society that is not following Islam, that has a lot of educational problems, poverty issues. The least of her concerns is the way she's covering. Okay? So I am always outspoken about this because the way that Muslim women cover have been used to justify wars. And I don't want to be liberated with my clothing. That's not that's not what I'm looking for here. So next time you see a Muslim woman, don't feel sorry for her. She actually feels like she's empowered and she believes in what she's doing. And modesty is not something that is only specific to Islam. If you look at nuns, if you look at Orthodox Jews, you will actually find that this concept of modesty is not purely an Islamic value. It's something that has really been a value throughout history. And then also just to talk about this belief that wow, we're really late. Okay, and those who launch a charge against chaste women and do not produce 4 witnesses to support their allegations, flog them with 80 stripes and reject their evidence ever after, for such men are wicked transgressors. And I put this in there to show how much a woman is valued in Islam, and that a man cannot even accuse her of something that is incorrect without having 4 witnesses to the actual act itself, and how much that God has actually elevated the status of women. Okay, and very quickly, women's rights in Islam. Women were given the right to inherit. They used to be inherited, and then Islam gave them the right to inherit, the right to full financial support from a spouse. When a Muslim woman marries, her husband has to pay for everything. Clothing, food, rent, even if she's wealthy, even if she works, he has no right to her money whatsoever. And if she wants to contribute to the household, it's considered charity to the husband. So the man is required 100% full financial support for the wife and the kids. Right to money without interference. The husband has no right to my money. He's not on my bank account. He can't tell me how to spend my money. It's my money. Right to marital dowry. When a woman marries, the man has to give her a percentage of his income as a marital gift, and again, that becomes her money that he can't touch afterwards. The right to choose a spouse. The Prophet Muhammad specifically said that if a woman does not give her permission to marry, that it is an invalid marriage. Also, Muslim women should and are supposed to keep their maiden names, because just because you marry you do not become the property of your husband, nor do you change your familial affiliation. So your name is your lineage. That's why a lot of times, like, my name is different from my husband's. Right to education. It says in the Quran, it is incumbent on every human being to pursue education without differentiating between men and women. The right to equal pay for equal work, and the right to modesty and dignity, not objectification, which is a right that we're actually fighting for in Europe and in places like France, where they are actually trying to force us to stop covering and taking away those rights. So they said we have 2 minutes, maybe we'll try to push it, but questions?
Could you define infidel?
The word in Arabic is kafir, and a lot of times it's translated as infidel, but kafir has a lot of different connotations to that word. It could mean a disbeliever. It could be one who is an enemy against Muslims and Islam. It could be one who associates partners with God. There's many different aspects of that word. So I don't even really know what's meant by the term infidel, to be honest with you.
It gets paired with jihad a lot, though.
Right.
So for us to be proper ambassadors, we need to be able to.
So in the Quran, there's a verse that says, that is telling, and again, we have to contextualize everything. It was a time when Islam was first starting, and the Quraysh were the disbelievers, and they were constantly in battle with the Muslims. So there was a specific verse given to Prophet Muhammad that said, and you may do jihad against the kafirs, against the Quraysh. And that's translated as the infidels. Now, the Quran was sent down over 23 years in response to specific situations that were happening at the time. What happens now is that people are taking these verses and they're saying it is applicable to every non-Muslim, everybody who isn't Muslim out there, without understanding the context. And if they read further that quote, that's where it says, but if they stop, you must stop. And it was directly in reference to the kafirs in Quraysh attacking Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And again, I would encourage you to look that up in the Quran.
Where would we find it?
I believe it's in chapter 60, verse 8, under the Allah forbids you not with regards to that, but I can look that up for you, inshallah.
I'd like to add to that, historically, when in Muslim Spain for 800 years, there was a period of convivencia, where under the Muslim rule, the Muslims respected the Jews and Christians as well as other people of the book, people who revered the Bible. So there's a special status for Christians and Jews.
Yeah.
Let's go one step further and bring it back to Palestine, right? That was going on with the Crusades. It was actually the Jews and the Muslims protecting against the Christian invaders.
Yeah.
The Jews were still there and they were protected by the laws of Islam.
And actually, under the Islamic Empire, Christians were allowed to have their own court systems, separate from the Sharia system.
Even today in Spain, we toured the Alcázar in Sevilla, and the bulk of the presentation by the guide, who was Catholic, was in the decorative arts in Alcázar. There's representations from all three.
Yeah,
exactly. It's beautiful.
Most of the churches in Spain, right, were actually masajid, or mosques, right? And,
originally.
Yeah, originally.
So sorry, we keep.
Yeah. In 30 seconds, can you give us the major split between Shias and Sunnis, because that is something that's frequently in the news?
Okay, so it's a little bit different than Catholicism versus Protestantism, but the parallels we'll try because I think it's contextual for that. So there's the people that were originally with the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, that followed him. And so the things that he did and whatever, that's called the Sunnah. And so anybody that follows that is a Sunni Muslim. Okay, so that was the original. And then there was actually an event where it happened where there was a disagreement of some things, and there's a lot of details there, but 30 seconds isn't much time. And then those people broke off.
It was a disagreement of who should be the successor.
The next successor to the Khalifa, the Caliphate, right? And so they basically shot off, and then those people would become the Shiite Muslims, okay, and they moved to one specific area. And the main difference now is that the Sunnis don't have any kind of clerical structure. There's universities and there's imams, but that just means the person who stands in front leads prayer. Literally, that's what that means.
And we have scholars who advise us.
And they're scholars, but they have rulings and whatever, but they can't say, yes, you can do this. No, it's yes, you can do this because this is what the Prophet did, this is what it says in the Quran, this is what it says and whatever, and then you decide what you want to do. But the Shiites have an Ayatollah, which is like the Pope. And so he has, ayat, okay, religious edicts, he speaks for God, and in the end, he is the supreme leader over everything. And so then there's a structure underneath him with the mullahs and whatnot.
And basically, because they believe in a blood lineage from Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, they believe in what's called the 12 infallible imams, and they believe it's all about the family and the lineage of Prophet Muhammad, so they give kind of divine status to blood lineage. Okay?
I'm not sure I heard you correctly. The Shiites do have a personal leader?
Yes.
That is
the Ayatollah. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
The Ayatollah is their Pope. And then it's all underneath
So
it.
in Iran, when they're talking about the Ayatollah, that's That's
for the
person
Shia.
that is in charge.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Which is interesting, the three major points of conflict are where the majority of Shiites are. I don't know why. It's very interesting. It would be interesting to do a study on that.
But even the Iraqis, the Afghanis, and whatever, the Shiites all look back to him. That's a supreme leader for all of them. So it's not just that country. Yes.
I have a quick comment and then a question. My comment is, I get so frustrated, like I have Facebook conversations with people who say like, Christians and Jews don't freak out when somebody makes a movie that they don't like. And Christians and Jews don't blow themselves up. And first of all, like, I mean, they do. Second of all, like, think of the Inquisition, they were burning young women at the stake because they might have said the wrong thing. And as far as like suicide bombing, it was started by communists in Lebanon. I mean, this is an historical moment in time. It's not inherent in the religion.
Exactly.
And I find that helpful. The question is, so I worked at a think tank in Washington when I came back from Palestine. I don't recommend it. It's a horrific experience. They would have like these Middle East experts come in and say, you know, here's how Muslims think. I'm really mispronouncing everything. You know, they have the Dar el Salam and Dar el Harb, and you know they always want to expand the the abode of peace and conquer the abode of war. And I was just like, okay, I lived in Palestine for 2 years. Nobody mentioned Dar es Salaam, and nobody mentioned Dar el Harb. They just want their olive trees back.
Right. They just want their kids to go to school.
Yeah. So, but what is that anything at all? This Dar es Salaam thing, or is he just making things up completely?
There's a term like during the time when there is actually a war and it's like a direct battle between that you would say that, but it's such a convoluted and confused situation. I don't even fully understand it, and it's not something that is by any means an everyday part of a Muslim life. Right. So I think you could say that in specific war situations these terms are used, and how and in what context is it kind of is used by the people involved in that, but the vast majority of Muslims have no clue what you're talking about, including me, to be honest with you.
Oh, I just wanted to say that I just started reading this book, and I don't know if you're familiar with it, The Shia Revival.
No, I'm not.
But at any rate, it's by Ali Nasser, who's an Arabian scholar.
Okay, so that would be a good source.
It's because just the historical thing, it never sort of stays with me, but it's really talking about the current situation and the Shia Revival, what an impact it's having on them.
Good, thank you. Wahhabism. Okay. So I think again this is a good way for, it's kind of this divide and conquer technique that Americans are really good at just trying to label, right? And even Muslims will start to pick up those labels. So Wahhabism it's very interesting based on who you talk to. So if you go to Saudi, they would say that they are Wahhabis, okay? But they are not meaning what America means when they use the term Wahhabism. What they're saying is that there is a man called Ibn Abdul Wahhab who is a Saudi, and he revived Islam in Saudi Arabia. So it was like, kind of going to pot, and so he came back and said, no, let's go back to the source and let's really follow the religion. And so they would call themselves Wahhabis because they say that they are the ancestors of that revivalism. Now, when it's used in America, they're using it to say these crazy, fanatical extremists that send their kids to these madrasas, and that their whole point is Dar al-Harb and Dar al, there's the world of peace and the world of war, and we're just all out to convert people. Maybe there's a group like that. I've never met anybody from that group, and maybe it's this tiny little percentage that is trying to create the chaos in the world, if that's all of that is true. But basically, it's so hard to really define these terms, because what is a Muslim? A Muslim is one who believes in one God, period of the story. How the individual decides to practice that is really up to the individual. And because we don't have clergy and institution, there is no kind of set way of defining things.
When I'm confronted with this connection between the whole Muslim civilization and 9/11, I always use the Oklahoma City bombing.
Exactly.
And I said, oh, I understand the man was a Christian that did that, therefore, all Christians must be terrorists.
Yeah,
I'll share something terribly personal about that. And I used that exact example before too. So, and this really ties something personal to me and my family. So don't think that, it's just, these certain people and extremists and whatever that were really terrorized after the period between 9/11 and even now. So my family, we've lived here all our lives. We're U.S. citizens, 100%. We participate in, I mean, I'm a professor at the university, and my wife worked for an engineering company, and, okay, so whatever. But the FBI came, and they've been knocking on our doors. They call us, they interrogate us. One time during an interrogation, the guy is like pointing at me, and you said something else with the pronunciation. He's like, "Are you a Slophist?" I'm like,
A Slophist.
And I'm like, what is that? And he just keeps, Slophist, he keeps saying it. He's mispronouncing it. So it's Salafi. Okay, this is another Wahhabi, whatever, Salafi, whatever terminology that they try to pin you in. And you know, I turn it around on him and I'm like, well, where were you when my